course you took and the changes that we had and how we learned from each other and other people. I'm thrilled to meet you as well. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about social emotion. And as I wrote in a note, we're going to focus more narrowly for most of the session on spirituality, which is one of the main, from my perspective, one of the main areas of spirituality. Spirituality is one of the main areas of social and emotional learning that could really a lot of implications for education, etc. So we're going to, and it's going to be interactive this session. It's going to ask you to study together with other people who are on this session. And we're going to learn together, which I'm very, very excited about. I'm going to my PowerPoint for you. I assume that you can, I hope you can see this. And here we go. So I call this Cultivating Social Emotional Learning in Jewish Education. And I'll start with a brief story that happened to me many years ago. I was teaching a group of 10 and 11-year-old children, and we were talking about the day of Passover, Pesach. And I asked, and we were going on about the different names of Pesach, which is a very common exercise. And then at one point I mentioned that one of the most well-known names of Pesach is really Chag HaCherut, the holiday of liberty or of freedom. And I tried to explain together to the kids the importance of freedom. And almost, I remember very, very clearly, one of the children, this young girl, Sharon, she gets up and she says, you know, what is freedom? What does it mean to be free? Are we really, truly free all the time? And I said, what do you mean by that, Sharon? What's bothering you? And all of a sudden she said, you know, we're not really, truly free all the time. She said, a holiday of freedom doesn't really mean you can do whatever you want. And all of a sudden, a boy jumped in, his name Aaron, and he said, you know, we can't do whatever we want. He said, I have to do what my parents say. Or when I come to school, I have to be teacher or the head of school says. That's not total freedom. And then one of the other children, this went on and on. They got so excited and involved in this. And then one of the other kids said, you know, in our classroom, I don't feel so free. I'm afraid to say things because if I say them, somebody else might be offended, or in fact, what might happen is that I might make a fool of myself. Is that freedom? And so this whole discussion started from, I thought, a very straightforward discussion about the meaning of freedom and the holiday of freedom, and moved into a philosophical discussion, and then went into a whole other discussion about what it meant to children in the various positions that they found themselves in. And that's what I'd like to discuss today, is the power of social emotional learning, which is, this example for me really highlights what the potential is in terms of social emotional learning. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the need for proactive social emotional learning. We'll do that quite quickly. Then the bulk of the session will really be devoted to spiritual education as a paradigm of social emotional learning. We'll do some spiritual education activities, and and then what we will do, I hope for a significant amount of time, is actually study a text from Exodus 3.
Educativas y temas que es importante tratar.
Jeanette, I hear you. I don't know but else does.
Because I'm not as an interpreter.
Oh.
You should, Marcelo, me tenés que volver a definir como intérprete, perdón, me disculpo, el Zoom me disparó afuera, הוא פשוט, הזום פשוט העיף אותי החוצה, ועכשיו נכנסתי שוב, אבל לא כאינטרפרטר, סליחה, מתנצלת.
Thank you. Okay. So now what is social emotional learning? Social emotional learning involves the processes through which children and adults acquire, effectively apply.
I'm sorry, Howard, if you don't mind, because I'm still not interpreter. Okay. I'm not defined as interpreter, so Marcelo needs to.
Okay. So it's to the necessary skills to understand and manage emotions. That's one. Two, it's to set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, which is so critical for people of ages. And finally, it's to establish and make positive relationships and make responsible decisions. And if I just take all three of these criteria, I think that this really meets what happened in the episode that I just described to you, these 10 and 11-year-olds, in terms of what they did with the topic of freedom. Excuse me. Now, I'm emphasizing the fact that during Corona, we know for sure through a variety of very extensive study and research that the pandemic affected the lives and social emotional experiences of every student to some extent, according to a study done in 2021. And we're not going to have the opportunity to go in depth, but if you are interested, I have as much data as you might want. So what is social learning? If we break it down, it talks about self-awareness, that I want kids to be, or adults, aware of what they are doing and how it, in fact, impacts others. I want them to have self-management in terms of functioning effectively among their peers and among and in other settings as well. I want them to be socially aware, not only but socially aware of what impact what they are is having on others. Relationship skills. How do we help our students of all ages develop effective relationship skills? And finally, responsible decision making. So if I look at these 5 areas of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, I come where I have some sense of what we're trying to do in social emotional learning. Now, for our purposes, social emotional learning has an internal aspect, which is introspective, thinking about what I am doing, contemplative, being reflective, encouraging our students to think how they feel, and externally about how one relates to the world. What am I doing to make this world a better place? And both of these, the internal as well as the external, come together in terms of what we want to give over to our students. Okay, I'll stop in another minute or two for questions, but I just want to complete this section by talking a little bit more about how this fits into Jewish education. And Jewish education definitely is impacted in the sense that regardless of how it takes place, a goal of education is learning to inform, practice, and shape one lives that learning in the world. In other words, we are not simply teaching, as everyone here knows, knowledge, but rather teaching norms. We are teaching values. We are teaching behaviors. We are teaching relationships. And that's why social emotional learning has such an important place in our Jewish education. I'm going to stop there for a moment. And if there are any questions or comments, please feel free. Okay, if there aren't, then we will move on now to spiritual education, which, as I mentioned earlier, is really an attempt to take social emotional learning and place it in most important features in Jewish education. Okay, what is spirituality? We'll discuss this briefly. Why address it? And then, as I mentioned earlier, we will study a text from Shemot 3 or Exodus 3. And hopefully, if we have next time, we will also touch on another critical spiritual issue directly related to all forms of Jewish education called whatever. Okay, start here with two definitions and invite you to think about what this says to you. So the first one is from Abraham Joshua Heschel, the famous theologian, philosopher, who wrote, "Goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be east." Now, when you take that and you think about it in social emotional, what Heschel is saying to us is, don't just think about rationally or cognitively what is spirituality, but rather internalize it, experience it, try to think of how this affects your life, which is definitely reflects what we saw earlier about social emotional learning. Another, this is the second one, and this is by Dr. Lisa Miller, whom, if you want to read a classic work on spirituality and education, I would highly recommend Lisa Miller's 2015 book, The Spiritual Child, or she had another book which is critical, which came out in 2021, The Awakened Brain, where she talks directly about spirituality, and she based it on different types of scientific experiments, which seem to prove, as much as we can say, that spirituality is really an inner capacity. It's built in to our being human beings. And Miller says spirituality is an inner sense of relationship to a higher power that is loving and guiding. The word we give to this higher power might be God, nature, spirit, the universe, the creator, or other words that represent a divine presence. In other words, it's something inner related to a relationship to a higher power. And everyone here obviously can define their power in different ways, as she encourages us to do. Okay, now what is the difference between spirituality and tradition and tradition or religion? So spirituality, and this is a critical piece of our work, is defined as a general potential. But when it is expressed in a tradition of language, practice, morality, and by a group of people to support and evaluate its efficacy, then it becomes religion. In other words, spirituality, the way I see it, is it's much more of an umbrella concept. And within that, religion and tradition based on practice and language, etc., can be one part of it. Okay. Now, the reason why we should deal with this, and I'm not going to go into this in depth, but you can read in front of you now how spirituality has been documented to spiritual awareness is a key to higher self-esteem, critical for our students of all ages. It motivates towards higher academic performance. Again, if you want to read any more studies, feel free to contact, and I will send you them. fewer depressive or anxious symptoms. And we, especially in terms of COVID-19, it's been documented, significantly mediated spirituality, significantly
y mediado
mediated
significativamente,
between fear and mental health.
que
And
sin duda,
finally, spirituality obviously is an essential part of Jewish life. Okay, I'd like to open this up now to a much more interactive session. And therefore, I brought here on the screen 5 different photos, 5 different pictures of events or phenomena that have been described by some people as spiritual. And what I'd like to ask you to do is think which one of these 5, please, for this exercise, one, and write into the chat which one, just number, which one for you really highlights what a spiritual experience is. So please take a moment and write into the chat. Four, 5, 4, 4. 4 seems to be very popular. Michelle, 3 and 4. Okay. Esther, 4. Ari, 5. Okay. Let's give it another couple of seconds. I'd like to open this up. If somebody here to share why you chose which number you chose. I can't see. Marcelo, can you see people's hands being, or people who want to speak? I just don't have access to that.
I can try it.
Thank you. Who's this?
Fabio.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Well, I chose 4. I'm not a particularly spiritual person, at least I don't identify with myself as such. So, I mean, I think nature and the fact that sometimes we can stop and appreciate it, like the sunset, as described in the picture. I think that's the closest to spirituality I can get. I mean, I do understand that number 5 might be very powerful for some people, but I don't have a child, so I have never felt it. So I think number 4 is the strongest I can feel about, I mean, me in touch with something bigger than me, which would be, in my understanding, spirituality.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I see that Susie Lampert.
And
raise your hand.
Iris, before Susie, Iris.
Oh, please.
Sorry.
Hi. So
Why
I
don't you just
chose,
say where you're from? That'll make it a little bit more personal. We'll be able to
Okay.
get to know.
yeah. So 1 minute, I will try to open the camera just for this. Can you see me?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, because I cannot see, but okay. So hi, I'm Iris and I'm from Maryland, USA. And I chose the 3rd picture because this is a community, and community is a lot of power. It's something that is bigger than you, that brings you to be connect and belong and have a place in the world. It's something that you are open yourself to and go to be part of something very big. It's not just to be at home
Wonderful.
and to think about maybe being belong, or try to do something at your home in your 4 walls, in your comfort zone. So this is something very big, the community for me.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely addition to what Fabio said. Thank you. Who's next?
Susie and Tamara and Jen and Ari.
Hi, everybody. I'm from outside of Chicago. And thank you very much. It's wonderful to learn from you again, Professor Deitcher. I really connect actually to all 5 of the pictures spiritually, but the reason I selected number 4 for this is whenever I'm in nature or see a sunset or look at the sky, it makes me feel an awareness, similar also to what Iris was saying, of being in the world, of knowing that we're in relationship with our planet, with each other, with the heavens and the earth. And I always feel like I can take a moment of gratitude, besides all the things that happen in the course of the day, for being available to access connection on so many levels.
Lovely. Thank you. That's very rich, and it's lovely to see you again.
Okay.
So we'll take another 3 or 4 more, and then we'll move on.
Okay. Tamara, Jen, and Ari. Tamara.
Hi, can you hear me? Is it
Yeah.
my turn? Okay, thank you, thank you. I come from Mexico, and just like they've just said, I think the 5 of them, when I saw each of these pictures, I thought they're all great. They all represent spirituality, but if I had to choose one, it would be number 5. The bond, the link between a parent and a child is what I've never experienced before. You're in absolute awe, amazement, and the link and the bond that you create with a baby, with your baby, it's irreplaceable, I would think.
Lovely.
Thank Tamara. Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm outside of Washington, D.C. It's nice to see everyone again. So I think my take is a little different from almost everyone else. I chose 4 because all of the others have other people in them. And if the question is about where do I feel spirituality the most, or when, or where, I have to be alone in order to connect with God. I don't feel God or spirituality in quite the same way when I'm surrounded by other people. But when I'm alone in nature, in a moment like this, or even just, by myself outside, that's when I feel most connected.
Thank
Lovely.
Ari, the last.
Hello, my name is Ari. I currently live in Madrid, Spain, but I will not translate to Spanish for you. And I picked number 5. I think I agree with what everybody said before. I think there's spirituality in all of them. But I actually looked at number 5, and not as a parent, but actually as a grandparent. And for me, when I see that next generation, and I look at them, and I look at all of that that required to get there. I can't deny that there's got to be a spiritual factor that plays into that, and creates that connection and creates that bond. And to me, that was the one that's just looking at the 5, which one hit. That was the one, but I could see, like everyone else said, with the other four as well.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to point out one obvious conclusion from this is the fact that this exercise 6 or 7 minutes, and we learned, I believe, volumes about other people, and we learn, I assume, also about ourselves from doing this kind of exercise. And I've been doing this exercise now for a few years, and I highly recommend this kind of exercise or others similar to it, because in point of fact, you're inviting people to reflect on an area called spirituality. As Fabio said, I thought so eloquently, it's something that comes easily to everybody. But yet, when you open it up in this way, which I believe is non-threatening and is really so open to interpretation, you really invite people to think about areas that otherwise they may not think about as carefully, and to share and to learn from others. So thank you very, very much for your participation in this piece. Okay, we're going to, does anybody want to say anything before we move on?
Actually, I do,
Please.
but I'm not sure if it's the right moment. I was thinking about, I meant to speak the other time you asked us to move ahead, but then I just didn't know if it was the right time. I still don't know if it is. But anyway, we're talking about working with spirituality as well as social emotional skills in a school setting. And I wonder, and now you've demonstrated it quite well. I mean, how can we do it in a way that is not only expositive, that is not just talking about it, right? I mean, that we can actually feel it. And secondly, since we are in a school setting, how can we measure that? How can we assess it, or should we assess it? But still, if we are in theory, everything we do in the classroom setting, we should be able to assess in a way or another. So should we, how can we assess it?
Excellent. Both excellent questions. So for the first one, in terms of what can be done experientially, I'm working on, I've done workshops all over the world actually on doing this with young children, spiritually young children, almost exclusively experiential. I love doing it, and kids, if you want, I just published an article a couple months ago in general childhood spirituality journal, where I used actually Havdalah as an experience. And the kids they prepared the candles, they followed the during the week to cement, et cetera, et cetera. I'm happy to send anybody who wants that article, but that was certainly the experiential piece. So I'm that with young children. I'm starting to do it next week. I'll be interviewing a group of 10th and 11th graders on their understanding of miracles. And we're going to do some exercises related to miracles as well. And as far as assessing and evaluation, there are, which I'm happy to share as well, there are different kinds of evaluation tools to see how people have grown spiritually as well. I hope that answers your question. Okay. With your permission, I'd like to say a text. And this text is a biblical text, which the reason why I focus on this text is because, in fact, I'm trying to show how here's the text. The text is from the 3rd chapter of Exodus. And the reason why I chose a chapter from the Bible is, first of all, this is most Jewish education structures, they study Bible. And this text, from what I know, is studied in different settings, school settings, in congregations, in several youth movements. In other words, it's a very common text. And it's not an esoteric text, and it's accessible. And the best part for me is that it's already part of the curriculum, so you don't have to pose it into the curriculum, which has already been set, but rather it's using this text as an opportunity to really discuss spirituality. Okay? And this text, I selected the first 6 verses from chapter, and from chapter 3. Take a look at this for a minute, take a look at these verses, okay? What I'd like you to do is to think for yourself, and if you're prepared, write them into the chat group. What, based on what we've heard and you know on your own in terms of spirituality, what spiritual questions or points of interest, what spiritual questions or spiritual points of interest surface for you from these 6 verses?
Sorry, Howie, I want to I want to explain to the Spanish speaker of the text.
Okay. So what I said is that read the 6 verses.
No, sí.
Is that okay?
Disculpa, Janet. Janet, disculpa. Lo que quiero decir es que posiblemente no todos leen inglés o todos leen hibrid, pero todos seguramente conocen.
Whatever you write in Hebrew or in English or in Spanish, just write down.
Janet,
what you
disculpa,
think
lo hago
about
yo
the
Janet, lo hago yo rápidamente. Se trata del texto en que Moisés se encuentra con el Sneboer, con la brasa ardiente, y ahí escucha la gran revelación, escucha la voz de Dios hablándole desde la zarza ardiente, y entonces le dice, sácate los zapatos que estás en tierra sagrada, y Moshe entonces cuando se da cuenta que esto es así, se tapa su cara para no ver la cara, para no ver a la santidad.
Okay, so Nancy wrote angel, nature, power, miracle, respect for greater being, fear and awe. Okay. Iris wrote, I assume refers to the 6th verse. Okay, could you just, if you could just expand that a little bit, amazement, excellent. In terms of spiritual questions, Iris, or anybody, surface for you when you read these verses. Connections with previous generations, ancestry, wonderful. Amazement, excellent. Awareness of holy land and need to take off, lovely. Something is different and sacred in this space. Very nice. Thank you, Susie. And if you think of more than one, feel free to add them into the chat as well. God, all generation, I'm part of something. So, oh, lovely. Lovely, Iris. Thank you. The need to take a second look to understand what is happening in front of him. Love, very, very nice. These are great. More, if anybody from the Spanish speakers, please feel free to share with us. Oh, thank you, Nancy, for responding to others as well. That's critical. Okay, we'll wait another minute and then we'll move on. And disbelief. Very nice. Okay. I'm going to highlight a couple of things that I noticed, and these were actually some people already said them. One of the things, one of the literary tools that we studied, of course, was what we call lead words, or in Hebrew, a milaman. And if you look in these verses, you will see that in fact the word resh aleph hey in Hebrew, or to see, appears 4 times in verses 2 through 4. Okay, now if you look at that, I'm just going back and forth so you can see what's going on here. If you in verse says, an angel of the Lord appeared unto, right away, the angel, as somebody mentioned, that's one of the most obvious ways you can see spirituality. And then it's Vayar Malach Adonai Elav B'toch Vayar V'hinei Hasneh. And then Moses, what they translated here, and he looked. Is it simply looking, or is it with a certain sense of curiosity? It's looking with a certain sense of depth, searching for meaning. And then it says, Asura na ve'er'eh et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh. In verse 3, it says, and Moses said, I will turn aside now. Once again, what does it mean? I will side and see this great sight. It's not just looking at it, but another level of vision. It's another level of sight. And once again, we have this tool called the literary tool of lead words. And this word appears, as you can see here, 4 times in just 6 verses. Okay. Another thing, another tool that we've learned in my course, we call words. An echo word, a biblical echo word, a word in the Bible that does not appear very often. It actually appears very seldom, but whenever it does, has a certain association. Okay? And in this case, if you look in these verses, can anybody come up with an echo word, a word that does not appear that often, but it appears here and it appears in other few places in the Bible, and whenever it does, invites us to think, what's the connection between this context and the other context in which this word appears? Anybody? Please call out. We don't need to do it in that.
Hineni.
Anybody?
Hineni.
Excellent. Who said that? I just can't say.
Jen.
Excellent, Jen. Absolutely. What is Hineni? It's been translated here as
Here am I.
Here am I. Excellent. Where else does it appear, Jen?
Avraham.
In the story of, if
The
you don't want to,
Akedah.
exactly, the story of the sacrifice of Isaac. Now, what would be the connection between that context and this context? And obviously there are others. What is Abraham being asked to do in 22 of the book of Genesis? What's he being asked to do, and what does it mean here?
So with Avraham, he was moments away from sacrificing his son. So there's that urgency to heeding the angel's call.
Excellent.
I don't know if there's a similar kind of urgency here, but it seems as if maybe Moshe was going to leave this space out of fear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. We could go on and on. Foreshadowing. foreshadowing is where you have a certain detail that is, or a place that is mentioned here, and it sets the stage for a later point in the Bible where the same location or same scene appears later on. And I'll just to cut because we don't have much time, I'll just tell you what I'm thinking about is he led his flock to Horeb, the mountain of Horeb, which the mount unto Horeb. And what else happens on what's called the mountain of Horeb later on in the book of Exodus? That's where, in fact, that's where the Torah is given. The same place where God reveals himself to Moses is the same place that the Torah is given later on to the Israelites. And I'm raising it because it helps us understand the important place. As somebody said earlier, spirituality. And in this case as well. Okay, we could go on and on, but I want to some commentaries that highlight this even more powerfully. The desert is always associated with sense of spirituality. Anybody who's ever spent time in the wilderness, in the desert, I believe, and I've done this myself, if you go on a trek in the desert for a certain period of time, it really is such a powerful, moving experience. Many people call that spiritual. And here the Midrash teaches us, anyone who does not make themselves ownerless like the wilderness cannot acquire the wisdom and the Torah. Therefore, in this context, the Sinai wilderness. And as somebody said when we asked which one of those photos they selected, I can't see you in front of me, so therefore I don't remember who said this, but somebody said for them, being alone cultivates a sense of spirituality. And here, Moses is, in fact, all alone, and where he sees this wonderful sight that he doesn't fully put together, fully understand. Now, Moses says something very odd or unusual. He says, let me consider and see. What's that all about, people? What does it mean if we go back to the text? Let's look at the text one more time. The text says, here we go. And the angel, and behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him, to Moses, in a flame of fire in the midst of a bush, and he looked. And then in verse 3, Moses said, I will turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. Now, what does that say to you? What does that say to you? Why does it emphasize once again that says, I will see what's going on here? Anybody, please? Oh, does anybody want to speak? Put the icon on for speaking. Raise your hand, and you're welcome to share your thoughts. What does it give over to you? This that he turns to look carefully. What's that about, Susie?
I think, again, like in your day-to-day as you go about, maybe he was thinking about other things. He was tending to his flock, and maybe he saw something out of the corner of his eye and then realized, wait, this isn't ordinary. I have to look at this. I have to investigate this. There's something here that needs attention, a deeper moment to think about.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else? what is it? What does this scene generate for you? How do you wonder this?
So I think that it's curiosity, it's being a
Excellent.
human being, it's being someone that is not just said, okay, he said hineni, he said I'm here, but although he wants to be able to understand more, and we even see that Moses, all the way, he said to God, no, it's not me, and argue and try to go away from this. I don't understand. I don't know how to say it in English, but this big adventure that God want him to do. So just to being human, to connect to
Excellent.
us in this level.
Excellent. In other words, it's a sense of curiosity, and it's really human nature. And that's what spirituality is all about. In other words, he doesn't just look at what's going on, but rather he really focuses on this. This is one area of spirituality called mindfulness that we teach so much in education today, in terms of helping us and our students really get down deeper into the focus of what we're looking at, and really taking a more careful and in look at what we are seeing. And for students of all ages today, that's so critical, especially in this era, in this period of digitalization, phones and quick images. The ability to just focus on something is so important and so lacking in our lives, that I think that this is a wonderful opportunity. Anybody else?
I'm not sure if I read it correctly, but
Please.
I have this feeling that he's saying to himself, "No, I'll look at this again, and I won't see anything. This is not happening." I really think he doesn't believe it. So
Excellent.
I mean, I'll take a look again, and it's not going to be there. This is not happening. But then when he looks, it's there. So I think that's the feeling I have.
Wonderful. No, that's great. But he takes, as you said, I'm building on what you said. What he does here is that he takes the opportunity to actually look at it again. He takes the opportunity to say, well, let me see if I can make sense of this. Let me see what it says to me. And that's when God says, Moses, Moses, and he repeats his name twice, which is obviously very significant in any literary text, but certainly in terms of the Bible. And that's when Moses says, here I am, Hineni. Okay. Just want to show you a couple of other possibilities. This is a wonderful quote. If we don't try to see providence, then we won't see or experience any. And we don't know what providence is. And if you want to take this, providence could be something with God in it or without God in it. But it is something beyond us. It's the spiritual. This is the principle that unless one searches, one will never see. Moshe merited everything because he halted in order to burning bush. There were many other shepherds that had passed by the bush burning, but they didn't stop. Moshe stopped to see because he knew that everything that a person has a purpose. I would love to share that message with students of all ages. I would love them to really think about how they can look at different types of phenomena in different ways and derive from that different types of meaning. Then finally, the whole issue that was mentioned earlier about the need for him to take off his shoes. God orders him, Moses, to remove the sand of his feet. The reason may possibly be because being holy ground, it should not be trodden by any occupying and therefore possessing shoe. In other words, it's a form of creating holiness is when we are able to remove the protection that we have from our body to the ground. And this is a very message as well. And finally, I'm going to end with what for me is a very powerful. The vision of the burning bush can be understood as a symbol of that spiritual passion which seizes without consuming. The vision of the burning bush can be understood as a symbol of that spiritual passion which seizes without consuming. That's wonderful. Such a powerful message. So we're going to conclude in about 2 or 3 minutes. If there's any, before I summarize, would anybody like to add anything or to ask any questions before we bring this to an end?
May I?
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. Since I can't see any comments, I just want to say really thank you, and I'm looking forward to so many more classes like this that enrich and make us think and make us understand why we are in this field and what is why this passion is so burning inside of us. So really, thank you.
Thank you very much. Tamara, please.
Well, thank you. May I go back to the desert?
Please.
Okay. It was really surprising for me when I thought exactly the contrary. It was not in isolation that we became a people, but when we were together, and that experience was in the desert. I mean, the desert represents not only solitude, but also, I would think, our becoming the people of Israel in the desert together, the link between all of us.
Wonderful. Okay, that's a wonderful thought. And in fact, one of the classic questions is, why was the Torah given in the desert and not in the open land or in, habited places? And one of the reasons that is given is, in fact, that the desert, when you're living in the desert, you're, as a group, you are dependent on each other, and you build a sense of peoplehood and trust. And you have to trust also nature, because you're not in control. And as you said so beautifully, that's really where the Israelites grew as a people as well. What we've tried to do over the last hour is really to talk a little bit about social emotional learning, its importance for our own growth and for the growth of our students of all ages. Then what we did was we talked about the importance of sexuality and how that really demonstrates the deeper and really impact of social emotional learning. And then we studied a text, which are so many other examples that we could have taken to really highlight the possibilities of spirituality in terms of our own life and also in terms of the lives of our students. It was a pleasure for me and to have this opportunity to study together with you and to learn so much from you in the courses that we had together as this today or this evening. So thank you very, very much. And you are doing wonderful work. If you are working as an educator or you are learning on your own, this is one of the most important areas that we can do for furtherance of Jewish tradition, knowledge, understanding each other, and really learning to be better people around the world. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Deitcher, Howie, and thank you for your participation. I realize you know, but we are going to wait for you in the next conference of this auditorium series with Dr. Tanya Zion Waldox, how to bring a feminist perspective into our Jewish education classrooms and why bother. And this will be in March 12th, Sunday at this hour. And we hope to see you. Thank you very much and have a nice week and a good holidays, okay, from tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
תודה רבה, להתראות.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.